All right, hello, seventh graders. Today we are going to test out this screencast as a lesson. You are also going to be learning about inferences and copying down and learning some new vocabulary. So before we get started, I want to go over some directions. It's very important that you complete all the work needed in your packet so that you are getting full credit for this station. You may pause this screencast at any time. I will give you some time to answer some questions, but you can always work at your own pace. Also, the orange text is what you will be filling in, and the blue text gives you directions to work inside your packet. I don't want you guys to just focus on the orange text and just filling in blanks. Make sure that you are answering those questions and those directions written in blue so that you are getting full credit and tapping into all of your learning skills. So first we're going to talk about inferences. What I want you to do now in your packet is write down what you remember about inferences. We studied inferences in the beginning of Part-Time Indian, and we made many inferences about Junior and other characters, and it's really important that you practice this skill and continue to practice it throughout your academic life. So go ahead and write down anything about inferences that you can remember. All right, so now that you've written down what you can remember about inferences, I'm going to define it. An inference is a judgment or an assumption made about a character in the text. And when we make an inference, we use something called schema. Schema is our previous experiences and knowledge combined. So we take experiences from our personal life, or from other things that we have read and experienced, and we combine that with knowledge, just knowledge of the outside world, as well as knowledge about the book that we have. So I know that you guys researched Sudan and that we have previous knowledge about Salva and Naya, and we use our personal experiences and our previous knowledge, which is schema, in order to make connections and inferences about the character. Making an inference is important because it helps us understand the characters, their motives, their personalities, as well as the plot of the story a lot better. And this way we can become talented, strong readers. When you pick a quote, it's really important that you are not just choosing any random quote. This is a trend I see a lot of us doing sometimes when we're asked to provide quotes or evidence for our homework, or when we are asked to provide quotes and evidence on our exit tickets and assessments. You should not just pick any random quote. You need to pick a quote that has a strong connection to the story. So you need to think about the following questions. When you're picking a quote, ask yourself, what do you know about the character already? What do you know about the character and their conflicts? What do you know about the major topics that are in the story? So what I know already is that Salva is lost from his family. There's a war, and he found some people in his village, but he then was abandoned by the people from his village, and he is seeking comfort and companionship during these hard times. Right now, I want you to go ahead and answer the question, what else do you know about Salva? What am I missing in chapters 1 through 4? What else are you learning about Salva at this time? All right, so now that you've written what you know about Salva, let's move on. I'm going to give you an example inference. On page 17, he is staying with a woman, and it says, he had hoped that the woman might have some answers for him. After all, she was an adult. Instead, she had only questions. Everything was upside down. And here we can make a couple of inferences. We can assume, which is an inference, that Salva thinks that adults have the answers, which we often do believe. But he is being let down here, and we can infer that Salva is feeling confused, upset, or let down. I know this because he talks about how the woman did not have what he wanted, which were answers, and he feels things are backwards, and he mentions that when he says things are upside down. His expectations, which are that the adults would be able to help him, has not been met. So even though Salva is the child and the woman is the adult, she's the one asking him, where's your family? How will you find them? Are you an orphan? And that's making him more confused and more let down because he can't find an adult to help him. And I can infer that with my past experiences and what I know about Salva. I refer back to these 3 questions. I know that Salva is lost and abandoned, but he does have a family. I know that there is a war and he faces being alone. And I know the major topics of the story revolve around survival and war and other topics like that. So I've used those to make this inference about Salva feeling confused, upset, or let down. Now I'm going to go into some vocabulary for the next couple of chapters. Our first word is clashed. This appears on page 26. For today, I am going to be giving you the context clues, but in future lessons, I will expect you to come up with context clues that help you figure out what some vocabulary words mean. I find clashed on page 26 in the text where it says, her tribe, the Newer, often fought with the rival Dinka tribe. Men and boys were hurt and even killed when the 2 groups clashed. And sorry, this should say when, not hin. I look inside this and I see the word 2 and I see rival, so I know that these are 2 opposing forces. And I see the word fought, so therefore I know that these 2 forces are fighting, and then I also see hurt and killed. So those are my context clues: rival, hurt, fought. Other context clues you can list on your own. I know that the word clashed means to come into conflict. So when you have 2 things coming into conflict. We have the Newer tribe, which is Naya's tribe, and the Dinka tribe. They are in conflict with each other. They have been fighting for a very long time. And Salva is a part of the Dinka tribe, so that's a major conflict in our novel. I want you to use the word clashed in a sentence on your own paper. Go ahead and write that down now. All right, and if this is moving too fast, you can always pause, but make sure you're staying on task and moving at a good pace. Now that you've written your sentence, I'm going to go to the next word. This word is luscious. Luscious. This word's found on page 28. In the text it says, nothing had ever tasted so good as those pieces of honeycomb dripping with rich, luscious gold sweetness. Here I know that Salva is eating honey, and he has been waiting for this moment for a while to have some sort of treat because he's been walking and having to fight for his life. Some of the context clues that help me define this word are rich, gold, and sweetness. These words help me define luscious as something pleasing, something sweet, and something rich in taste. So now I want you to use the word luscious in a sentence on your paper. Moving on to the next word. This word is rebelled, and this is a pretty important word. We've already seen it a few times in the text. Rebelled shows up on page 36, and it says, after so many weeks of near starvation, his stomach rebelled mightily. He spent most of the night vomiting. Now, instead of using synonyms as context clues, we learned other ways to define words are through examples. I have the word starvation here. Sorry for the typo here. This A should not be here. And I know that Salva has been near starvation for many weeks. And sometimes when you eat, sometimes when you don't eat and then you eat a lot, you can make yourself sick. So here Salva has had nights of not eating, and he ends up being able to eat with his uncle, and he eats maybe too much, and his stomach rebels mightily, mightily being strong, rebelling meaning to fight back, and his stomach fights back by vomiting, and I know that vomiting is the way that the stomach does fight back. So my context clue was an example of starvation and vomiting. I know that those are two opposing things, as well as mightily, so I know that that means strong. So rebelled means to fight against. And at this time, I want you to go ahead and use the word rebelled in a sentence on your own paper. All right, moving on to another vocabulary word. I have the word constantly. You may have heard this word before. In the text on page 40, it says, never letting Uncle get farther away than an arm's length away. He looked constantly. So Salva is making sure that Uncle is always close to him. The context clue I use here is the example of Uncle never getting far away. I know also in the book it compares him to being like a lion stalking his uncle, and so he doesn't want to get him out of his eyesight because he helps him feel safe. So the example of the word never lets me know that he is never letting him out of his arms, never letting him out of his sight. So he's looking constantly. He's looking the opposite of never, meaning that he is looking all the time. So constantly means always or all the time. I want you to now use the word constantly in a sentence on your paper. All right, lastly, we have the word staggered. In the text, Salva is retrieving large loads of reeds. It says Salva staggered forward with yet another enormous load of reeds in his arm. One of the ways we can define a word is by knowing its part of speech. Here I have a noun, Salva, followed by what is a verb. I can tell that this is a verb. If I wanted to get rid of the rest of the sentence, it would still make sense for me to say Salva staggered. So I know that this is a verb, and I know it's a form of movement, and it says Salva staggered forward with yet another enormous load of reeds in his arm. So I know that he is walking and carrying something. So my context clues are forward, enormous load, and examples of carrying weeds. I know that he's carrying something very large, and when you carry something large, sometimes you're not walking straight in a straight line. Sometimes you have a little bit of trouble walking. So therefore, I can define staggered as walked unsteadily, which means he is not steady as he walks. Go ahead and use the word staggered in a sentence on your paper.